Madison Walsh had worked at Clearwater Marketing Solutions for 3 years when she discovered she was pregnant with her first child. At 28, she had climbed from an entry-level position to become the company's most reliable account coordinator. Her supervisor, Derek Hoffman, had always praised her dedication and work ethic. The small marketing firm employed only 15 people, creating a family-like atmosphere that Madison cherished. When Madison shared her pregnancy news with Derek, his congratulations seemed genuine. He assured her that the company would support her through this journey, even mentioning how they'd figure out maternity leave arrangements when the time came. Madison felt relieved, knowing she could focus on her growing family without worrying about job security. However, things began to change subtly around her 20th week of pregnancy. Madison started experiencing morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon. Some days, she struggled to get out of bed before 8:30, making her 15 to 20 minutes late for her usual 8 o'clock start time. She always stayed late to make up for lost time, often working until 6 or 7 in the evening. Derek's attitude shifted noticeably. He began making pointed comments about punctuality during staff meetings, his eyes lingering on Madison. He implemented a new policy requiring all employees to clock in and out, something the relaxed office environment had never demanded before. Madison noticed Derek checking his watch whenever she arrived, his disapproval evident in his expression. The situation escalated when Madison experienced a particularly difficult morning during her 24th week. Severe nausea had kept her up most of the night, and she arrived at work 45 minutes late. Derek called her into his office immediately, his tone sharp and accusatory. "This tardiness is becoming a pattern, Madison," he said, leaning back in his chair with arms crossed. "I understand pregnancy can be challenging, but we have a business to run. Other employees are starting to notice, and it's affecting morale." Madison explained her situation, emphasizing how she always compensated by working extra hours. She reminded Derek of her 3 years of exemplary performance and dedication to the company. Derek listened with barely concealed impatience, tapping his pen against his desk. "I'm going to need you to figure this out," he said finally. "Consider this your official warning. Any further tardiness issues, and we'll have to discuss your future here." Madison left the meeting feeling shaken and hurt. She had given everything to this company, working weekends, handling difficult clients, and consistently exceeding her targets. The threat felt personal and discriminatory, but she needed this job, especially with a baby coming. Over the following weeks, Madison made enormous efforts to arrive on time despite her worsening morning sickness. She set multiple alarms, prepared everything the night before, and even considered sleeping in her car in the parking lot. Still, there were days when her body simply wouldn't cooperate. Derek's scrutiny intensified. He began documenting every minute she was late, creating a paper trail that Madison suspected was building toward something more serious. The supportive workplace she once loved had transformed into a hostile environment where she felt constantly watched and judged. Madison found herself crying in the bathroom at work, stressed about losing her job and health insurance when she needed them most. She had worked so hard to build her career, and now it felt like it was crumbling because of circumstances beyond her control. The irony wasn't lost on her that the very thing that should have brought joy to her life was threatening her livelihood. Derek's behavior became increasingly aggressive. He questioned her doctor's appointments, suggested she was using pregnancy as an excuse, and even implied that maybe she wasn't cut out for the demands of working motherhood. Madison began to wonder if she had any legal recourse, but as a small company employee, she felt powerless against Derek's authority. The breaking point came during Madison's 28th week of pregnancy. She had been having contractions throughout the night, concerning enough that her doctor had advised her to monitor them closely. When they intensified that morning, Madison called Derek to explain she would be late while she consulted with her physician. Derek's response was cold and unsympathetic. "Figure it out, Madison. We have client presentations today, and I need you here." Madison arrived 2 hours late after confirming with her doctor that the contractions were Braxton Hicks, not actual labor. Despite her relief and the medical necessity of her delay, Derek was waiting for her with termination papers already prepared. "This is your final strike," he announced, his voice lacking any trace of compassion. "Your chronic tardiness has become unacceptable. We're letting you go, effective immediately." Madison stared at the papers in disbelief. 3 years of loyalty, excellent performance reviews, and dedicated service meant nothing. Derek was firing her for being late due to pregnancy complications, something that felt both cruel and potentially illegal. "You can't be serious," Madison said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been one of your best employees. I've worked overtime countless times, brought in major clients, and never missed a deadline." Derek shrugged, unmoved by her plea. "Business is business, Madison. We need reliable employees, not people who can't manage their personal lives." The words stung like a physical blow. Madison gathered her belongings while fighting back tears, her coworkers watching in stunned silence. She had built relationships here, contributed to the company's success, and now she was being discarded like she meant nothing. As Madison cleaned out her desk, she overheard Derek telling another employee that they needed to hire someone more dependable and committed to the job. The implication was clear. Pregnant women were neither dependable nor committed. Madison left Clearwater Marketing Solutions that day feeling defeated and scared. She was 7 months pregnant, unemployed, and facing the possibility of losing her health insurance. The stress of the situation made her worry about the impact on her unborn child. However, Madison was about to discover that Derek had made a crucial mistake. In his eagerness to get rid of her, he had overlooked a significant detail that would soon come back to haunt him. The company's owner, Robert Clearwater, had been quietly observing the situation from afar, and what he had witnessed would change everything. Robert Clearwater had built his marketing company from the ground up 20 years ago, starting with just himself and a dream. He had always prided himself on creating a supportive work environment that valued employees as human beings, not just resources to be exploited. His company's success had been built on loyalty, mutual respect, and understanding that personal challenges were part of life. Robert had been traveling extensively for the past few months, securing new clients and expanding the business. During his absence, he had trusted Derek to manage day-to-day operations, believing his longtime employee shared his values and management philosophy. However, Robert had been receiving subtle hints that something was wrong. Client feedback had mentioned tension in the office, and Robert had noticed changes in employee morale during his brief visits. He had also received an anonymous email suggesting that Derek was treating staff unfairly, particularly targeting Madison. Initially, Robert had dismissed these concerns as workplace gossip, but the persistence of the complaints had made him suspicious. Concerned about his company's reputation and employee welfare, Robert had decided to investigate discreetly. He had installed security cameras in common areas and begun reviewing employee communications. What he discovered horrified him. The footage revealed Derek's systematic harassment of Madison, his deliberate attempts to create a hostile work environment, and his complete disregard for the values that Robert had worked so hard to instill in the company. Robert watched Derek's cruel treatment of a pregnant employee with growing anger and disgust. Robert also discovered that Derek had been manipulating client assignments to make Madison's job more difficult, hopping to create grounds for termination. He had been intercepting Madison's communications with clients, taking credit for her work, and spreading false information about her performance to other employees. The final straw came when Robert reviewed the security footage from the day Derek fired Madison. He watched Derek's callous dismissal of a dedicated employee, his complete lack of empathy for her situation, and his obvious satisfaction at causing her distress. Robert realized that Derek had not only violated company policy, but had also potentially exposed the business to serious legal liability. Robert immediately began documenting everything he had discovered. He compiled video evidence, email records, and witness statements from other employees who had observed Derek's behavior. The evidence painted a clear picture of discrimination, harassment, and wrongful termination. Meanwhile, Madison was struggling to process her sudden unemployment. She had applied for unemployment benefits, but the process was slow and complicated. Her savings were limited, and the stress of her situation was taking a toll on her health and pregnancy. Madison's husband, Jake, encouraged her to consult with an employment attorney. They met with Lisa Rodriguez, a lawyer specializing in workplace discrimination cases. Lisa reviewed Madison's situation and confirmed that she likely had grounds for a wrongful termination lawsuit. Pregnancy discrimination is illegal under federal law, Lisa explained during their consultation. Your employer cannot fire you for being late due to pregnancy-related medical conditions. The fact that you consistently made up the time and maintained excellent performance makes their actions even more questionable. Lisa agreed to take Madison's case on a contingency basis, meaning she would only be paid if they won. This relieved some of Madison's financial pressure, but the emotional toll of fighting her former employer remained significant. As Lisa began building Madison's case, she requested employment records, witness statements, and any documentation related to Madison's termination. She also filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, triggering an investigation into Clearwater Marketing Solutions practices. Derek, meanwhile, was basking in what he perceived as his victory. He had successfully removed what he saw as a problematic employee and was already interviewing replacements. He told colleagues that Madison's firing would send a message to other employees about the importance of reliability and commitment. Derek's satisfaction was short-lived. Robert returned to the office earlier than expected, armed with evidence of Derek's misconduct. He called Derek into his office for what Derek assumed would be a routine check-in about company operations. "I've been reviewing our recent activities," Robert began, his tone neutral but his eyes cold. "I'm particularly interested in Madison Walsh's termination. Can you walk me through your decision-making process?" Derek confidently explained his reasoning, painting Madison as an unreliable employee who had been given multiple chances to improve. He emphasized the importance of maintaining standards and treating all employees equally. Robert listened patiently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Derek interpreted Robert's calm demeanor as approval and continued his justification with growing confidence. "I think you'll find that the office runs more smoothly without her," Derek concluded. "Productivity is already improving and morale seems better." Robert nodded thoughtfully, then opened his laptop and turned the screen toward Derek. "I'd like you to watch something," he said, clicking play on a video file. The security footage showed Derek's interactions with Madison over the past several months. Derek watched in growing horror as his own behavior was displayed in stark detail. The video captured his hostile body language, his discriminatory comments, and his obvious targeting of Madison. "I've reviewed months of footage," Robert said quietly. "I've also spoken with several employees who corroborated what I observed. Derek, you've created a hostile work environment, engaged in pregnancy discrimination, and potentially exposed this company to significant legal liability." Derek's face had gone pale. He tried to explain his actions, claiming he was simply maintaining professional standards, but Robert held up a hand to stop him. "I built this company on the principle that employees are human beings who deserve respect and support," Robert continued. "What you've done goes against everything I believe in and everything this company stands for." Robert handed Derek a folder containing documentation of his misconduct. "You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and you'll receive your final paycheck by mail." Derek was stunned. He had expected praise for his management decisions, not termination. He tried to argue, claiming his actions were justified and that Robert was making a mistake. "The mistake was mine," Robert replied firmly. "I trusted you with the welfare of my employees, and you betrayed that trust. You've damaged this company's reputation and hurt a good person in the process." As security escorted Derek from the building, Robert was already planning his next steps. He needed to contact Madison immediately and attempt to make amends for the terrible injustice she had suffered. Robert called Madison that evening, introducing himself and asking if they could meet to discuss her termination. Madison was initially suspicious, assuming this was some kind of corporate damage control effort. "I want to be completely transparent with you," Robert said. "I've discovered that Derek acted without my knowledge or approval. His behavior was unacceptable, and I want to make this right." Madison agreed to meet, curious about what Robert had to say. When they met at a coffee shop near her home, Robert showed her the security footage and explained everything he had uncovered. "I am deeply sorry for what you experienced," Robert said sincerely. "Derek's actions were not only wrong but completely contrary to the values I try to instill in my company. I want to offer you your job back, with full back pay and benefits." Madison was overwhelmed by the revelation. Learning that Derek had been systematically targeting her validated her feelings and confirmed that his behavior had been inappropriate. However, she wasn't sure if she wanted to return to a workplace that held such painful memories. "I appreciate your offer," Madison said carefully, "but I need time to think about this. The stress of the past few weeks has been difficult, and I'm not sure I'm ready to come back." Robert understood her hesitation. "Take all the time you need. The offer stands indefinitely. I also want you to know that I'm prepared to provide a reference letter detailing your excellent performance and the circumstances of your termination." Madison thanked Robert for his honesty and left the meeting feeling a mix of vindication and uncertainty. She had been right about Derek's behavior, but the damage to her confidence and trust had been significant. Over the following days, Madison discussed the situation with her husband and attorney. Lisa Rodriguez was pleased to learn about Robert's investigation and willingness to make amends, but she advised Madison to consider all her options carefully. "This is a good development," Lisa said. "However, you still have grounds for a lawsuit not just against Derek, but against the company for allowing this to happen. The question is whether you want to pursue that route or accept Robert's offer." Madison weighed her options carefully. She could pursue a lawsuit that might result in significant financial compensation, but would also mean months or years of legal battles and stress. Alternatively, she could accept Robert's offer and return to a workplace under new management. The decision became easier when Madison learned more about Robert's response to the situation. He had implemented new policies to prevent discrimination, provided additional training for all managers, and created anonymous reporting systems for employees to raise concerns. Robert had also reached out to other employees who had witnessed Derek's behavior, apologizing for allowing the situation to continue and asking for their input on how to improve the workplace culture. Madison was impressed by Robert's comprehensive response and genuine remorse. She realized that returning to Clearwater Marketing Solutions might actually be the best option for her and her growing family. After a week of consideration, Madison called Robert to accept his offer. She would return to work after her maternity leave, with full pay and benefits restored, and a guarantee that she would be protected from any form of retaliation. Robert was delighted by Madison's decision. He had Madison's workspace prepared with flowers and a welcome back card signed by all her colleagues. He also arranged for flexible working hours during her remaining pregnancy weeks, ensuring she could attend medical appointments without stress. Madison's return to work was emotional but positive. Her colleagues were supportive and apologetic about Derek's behavior, many admitting they had wanted to speak up but hadn't known how. The office atmosphere had already improved significantly with Derek's departure. Robert made sure Madison felt valued and supported. He personally checked in with her regularly, not to monitor her performance, but to ensure she was comfortable and had everything she needed. He also made it clear that pregnancy-related accommodations were not just acceptable but expected. Madison's final weeks of pregnancy were much more peaceful than she had imagined possible. She was able to focus on preparing for her baby's arrival without the constant stress of job insecurity or workplace hostility. When Madison went into labor 3 weeks later, Robert sent flowers to the hospital and gave her a generous baby gift. He also assured her that her job would be waiting when she was ready to return, with whatever flexibility she needed as a new mother. The story of Madison's experience spread throughout the industry, not through gossip, but through Robert's deliberate efforts to share what he had learned. He spoke at business conferences about the importance of supportive workplace cultures and the legal and ethical obligations employers have to their pregnant employees. Derek, meanwhile, struggled to find new employment. Word of his termination had spread through the marketing community, and potential employers were wary of hearing someone with a history of discrimination. His reputation had been permanently damaged by his own actions. Lisa Rodriguez closed Madison's case file with satisfaction. While they hadn't pursued a lawsuit, the outcome had been better than many legal victories. Madison had been vindicated, compensated, and restored to her position with additional protections. Madison returned to work after her maternity leave feeling stronger and more confident than ever. She had learned that standing up for herself was important, but also that not all employers were like Derek. Some, like Robert, genuinely cared about their employees' well-being. Robert had learned valuable lessons about the importance of active management and oversight. He realized that trusting employees with authority required ongoing supervision and accountability. He implemented regular reviews of management practices and created multiple channels for employee feedback. The incident had transformed Clearwater Marketing Solutions into a genuinely supportive workplace. Other employees felt more secure knowing that discrimination would not be tolerated, and the company's reputation in the industry actually improved as word spread about Robert's principled response to the situation. Madison's baby, a healthy daughter named Emma, became an unofficial mascot of the office. Robert had installed a small area where Madison could pump breast milk comfortably, and colleagues enjoyed seeing photos of Emma's milestones. Derek's story served as a cautionary tale in the industry. His discriminatory behavior had cost him his career and reputation, while also exposing him to potential legal liability. The message was clear. Treating employees with respect and dignity wasn't just morally right, it was also smart business. As Madison looked back on her experience, she felt grateful for the unexpected turn of events. What had started as a devastating betrayal had ultimately led to a stronger, more supportive work environment and a deeper appreciation for employers who valued their employees as human beings. The story of Madison's experience became a powerful example of how workplace injustice could be addressed when leaders took responsibility and acted with integrity. It showed that while discrimination and harassment were serious problems, they could be overcome when people with authority chose to do the right thing. Madison's daughter Emma grew up knowing the story of how her mother had stood up for herself and how good people had helped make things right. It was a lesson about resilience, justice, and the importance of treating others with respect and dignity. Robert continued to lead Clearwater Marketing Solutions with the lessons he had learned from Madison's experience. The company thrived under his renewed commitment to employee welfare, and Madison became one of his most trusted and valued team members. The security cameras that had captured Derek's behavior remained in place, not as tools of surveillance, but as reminders that actions have consequences and that everyone deserves to be treated with respect in the workplace. Madison's story spread beyond the marketing industry, inspiring other employers to examine their own practices and ensure they were creating supportive environments for all employees, particularly those facing personal challenges like pregnancy. Years later, Madison would look back on this difficult period as a turning point in her career and life. She had learned that she was stronger than she had imagined, that justice was possible even in difficult situations, and that there were people in the world who would stand up for what was right. The final chapter of Madison's story was written not in revenge or bitterness, but in gratitude and hope. She had experienced the worst of workplace culture with Derek, but also the best with Robert. The contrast had taught her valuable lessons about leadership, integrity, and the importance of treating others with compassion and respect. Emma grew up in a world where her mother was respected and valued at work, where pregnancy was seen as a normal part of life rather than a liability, and where standing up for what was right was not just possible, but expected. Madison's experience had helped create a better workplace not just for herself, but for all the employees who came after her. The story of Madison Walsh and Derek Hoffman became a case study in business schools and human resources programs, illustrating the importance of ethical leadership and the consequences of discrimination. It showed that while injustice could cause tremendous pain, it could also be a catalyst for positive change when people chose to act with courage and integrity. Madison's pregnancy, which had once seemed like a threat to her career, had ultimately become the foundation for a stronger, more meaningful professional life. She had learned that the best employers were those who saw their employees as whole human beings with lives, challenges, and dreams beyond the workplace. The empty desk where Derek once sat served as a daily reminder to everyone at Clearwater Marketing Solutions that power came with responsibility, and that how we treat others, especially those who are vulnerable, defines who we are as people and as organizations. Madison's story was ultimately one of triumph over adversity, of justice prevailing over injustice, and of the power of good people to make things right when they choose to act with courage and compassion. It was a story that would inspire others facing similar challenges and remind employers of their obligation to create workplaces where everyone could thrive.